All right. Hello. My name is Erko. And before I begin, let me do a quick intro from my side. So I was one of the early engineers at Wise, and I saw the company grow from roughly 100 people to more than 1,000. And during my time there, we did a lot of building product. We did a lot of hiring. We did a lot of building teams. And today, I'm one of the co-founders of Producement, and we do a lot of building product, we do a lot of hiring, and we do a lot of building teams. So how do we go from an idea to an MVP? And let's kick it off with this classic Scott Adams quote, if the clicker would work. Yeah, okay, it works, thanks. And before we get there, so at the end of this talk, you will know things about building products that you don't know now, and something among those things will make a difference in your life. Now, this is a classic quote by Scott Adams. And he said that ideas are worthless and execution is everything. And I've seen many founders come and approach us, and they want to sign an NDA. And this basically tells me that they think that their ideas are very valuable. And this, in turn, hints to me that they don't really understand that execution is much more valuable. And I think that's a big mistake. So if you're a founder and you want to pitch your startup to someone, then don't make them sign an NDA. VCs usually won't even let you in the door. And the best founders that I've seen, they actually talk about their ideas very openly. They try to get as much feedback as they can. And the idea in their head is very flexible. So they get some feedback, they iterate on it, and the idea changes. So don't keep it very rigid. Now, who has seen this kind of a graph before, or this kind of a diagram? So what is it? Shout it out. So it's the waterfall model, right? And why doesn't this work in startups? So in startups, usually, the problem is not known, and the solution is not known. So this model is clearly flawed for the startup environment. So this would actually work in a very specific setting, which is if you know the problem and you know the solution. For example, if you're building something that you've built before, and you know that it actually solved the problem. So how does it actually work in startups? So that's more like it. When the problem is unknown, then you need to go through this customer development. And that's actually a term nailed by Steve Blank. And he's written many books about it. I won't go much into the details, but the whole point is iteration. You need to go through those iteration cycles. And if you're building the product, then in order to understand whether it's the correct solution to solve that problem, you need to go through this agile development iteration cycle. And this was actually nailed by Kent Beck. He's the father of test-driven development and so on. He's written the book called Extreme Programming. So I recommend reading what those guys have written about. And it's very important to keep these two things separate. Don't mix them up. And when you're doing the customer development phase, then try to understand how big is the problem. Are customers looking for solutions already? What tools are they using to solve their problem today? And are they actually willing to pay money for your solution? And it can be generalized to this kind of a model where you basically need to go through this build, measure, learn cycle. And your idea is, or your main goal is to minimize the time through this loop. And these are just some of the tools that you could use to code faster, measure faster, and learn faster. And I won't stop here for long, because that's basically the Lean Startup book. Who has read the Lean Startup? Actually, not too many. So if you haven't already, then this is the #1 book that every startup founder should read. So go and read it. Cool. So what is the very first thing you need to do? If you have an idea in your head, what is the first thing you do after getting the idea? You go and talk to customers. So you need to understand what is the problem that they're facing. Maybe it's a totally different problem that you think that they're facing. What kind of solutions are they using today? Are they willing to pay for your product? Is your solution viable? These are some of the questions that you need to understand before even going to the building phase. And what's the next thing? You've talked to customers, you've summarized your results. What is the next thing you do? What do you do with this information? You start prototyping. So I recommend people to start prototyping on paper, because it's very easy. Anyone can do it. You don't need to have any drawing skills. So get your engineers, your designers, your product managers, everyone in the same room, and just start drawing. Start thinking about what could be a potential solution to the problem that you just learned about by talking to customers. And then you can vote, who has the best possible solution by, using those tiny stickers and things like that. Next, you build a clickable prototype. We use Figma a lot. It's a very good tool. And don't spend a lot of time on colors and fonts and UI design. Just build the flow, make it clickable, and user test it. Show it to customers. Make sure they understand the value proposition. Make sure they get what the product is. And the easiest thing that I've done in the past is that I just show them the product and I ask them, what is it? Let the customers explain the product to you and see if they get it. So now you have this clickable prototype, you've user tested it, you iterated on it a couple of times, you're pretty certain, or you have some confidence that this is the right product to build. What's next? What do we do? We launch quickly. So we try to build a very minimal version of the product. And actually, I've seen many founders think that, what's the point of building this shitty version of your product? I want to build the whole thing. It's going to take a year and €1 million and a huge team to build the whole thing. And then I will learn whether anyone actually wants to use it. So what's the point of having this crappy version of it? And I think that's a mistake as well. So what you're optimizing here is actually getting feedback. And the best way to get feedback is to put it in front of customers. Let them play around with it. Let them use it. And having a real product is better than having this clickable prototype that kind of looks like a product but doesn't really do anything. And very often when you do this, you learn that the full product that you had in your head isn't actually what your customers want at all. And that's when you pivot, or you change your idea. And we want to ship early and often. And I would say that without shipping, you have no growth. And by definition, you're not a startup. Startups equal growth. So go and launch quickly. Next thing that we often do is we do things that don't scale. And what does that mean exactly? I can give you one example. So instead of building this product that is fully automated to solve the problem for the customers, we could just go and do it manually. We could first have a service business, offer it as a service. For example, if you're trying to build an investments product, then before you automate anything or build an app around it, go and do investments for customers. Take their money, invest it, send them some reports, whatever experience they need, and you don't need to write a single line of code for that. And of course, it's not scalable. You can maybe cater 5, 10, 20 customers like that. You're never going to make it like a billion-dollar company, but it's very important that you go through this phase because you will learn a lot from it. And you will understand which parts of that manual process I need to automate first, and which parts are the most painful for the customers. So do things that don't scale at first. Next, I think it's the cold, harsh truth that no one will care about your launch. Does anyone remember when Facebook launched, or Twitter launched, or Google launched? I don't remember. So that basically tells me that launches aren't that special at all. No one will care. So just put your product out there, see what the customers say. And I would even say that launching is not this one magical moment in time, but it's rather a continuous process. So launching is something that you do all the time in a startup. So first, you could launch to your friends, you could launch to your family, you could do this silent launch, you could build a website and build like a waiting list. You could launch to some online community, find a Facebook group of enthusiasts who want your product and go and launch to them. You could do a social media marketing launch. You could build new products, new product lines, launch them. So launching is something you do all the time. So don't be afraid of it. Don't think of it as something very special or magical. Next, KPIs and goals. We need to be very data-driven in startups. So everything we do needs to be data-driven. So what is the most important metric in a startup? What is the #1 number that you should measure and track? Shout out. Revenue, exactly. Revenue. So in 99% of the cases, your primary metric in a startup is revenue. Are customers actually willing to pay for your product? If they are, then this validates that you're solving an important problem for them and you have the right solution. If customers are not willing to pay, then you go back to the drawing board and you go and iterate and talk to customers and build your product. And in some cases, let's say 1% of cases, it's actually active users. And these are business models where the customers are not directly paying for the product, like Facebook. In those kinds of business models, you should look at active users. But in most cases, it's revenue. Now, when we say that revenue is our KPI, I'm talking about growth. We don't really care whether you're making 3,000 monthly recurring revenue or 9,000. That doesn't really tell us much. But what we care about is the growth rate. How fast are we increasing the revenue every month? And the next question is that, how fast should we grow? What is good growth? I would say that if you manage to grow your startup or revenue 20 to 40% month over month, then you have product market fit. If you grow slower, then go talk to customers, build your product. You have some work to do. It's not ready for scaling yet. Does anyone know how much are you growing year over year when you're growing that fast? So if you're growing 20% month over month, that's 12x a year. If you're growing 40% month over month, that's 140x a year. So it's a pretty big range. Now, of course, startups also have secondary metrics. And these are just some examples that we've used. I won't stop here for long, but these really help you to understand where your revenue is coming from and why. Next thing, planning. So how do we plan our product? How do we plan our MVP? And I've seen many founders try to estimate when are we going to be ready with our first version of the product. How long is it going to take? When is the release date? And I don't think that's very useful, because your plan or estimate will be wrong anyway. So what's the point of spending so much time in estimating if it's going to be a wrong number anyway? So don't waste your time on estimating, and rather focus on prioritization. And when I say prioritization, then I mean if at every single moment in time you are working on the most important item that you could possibly work on, then things will get ready when they get ready, and you couldn't have done it any faster anyway, because at every single moment in time you were working on the most important items. So how do we do prioritization? Now let's go through the checklist again. First, we set the primary KPI, which in most cases is revenue. Then we set our weekly goals for the KPI. Let's say we want to grow 5% week over week. And every week we talk to customers and build our product. And I think it's very important for founders to avoid wasteful activities. Things that are not really delivering value to your customers. So what are wasteful activities? Winning awards, pitch competitions, networking, talking at startup events. These are the things that are not providing value to your customers, so don't do them, especially at the early stage. Now, how do we prioritize? I like to use this very simple model where we take every task and we assess the impact, the customer impact, and usually you can measure that in some way. And then we assess the effort. And it doesn't need to be hugely accurate. Like, you can just say medium, low, high effort. And then every sprint, every week, we focus on the high impact and low effort items. And I would even say that skip the rest. Every single week, try to find the high impact and low effort items, and just keep the rest of the stuff in the backlog. And the high effort, low impact items, you never do them. These are the nice to have features of your product that you should never actually get to build, because every single week new items pop up that are more important. What about bugs? How do we know when we need to fix the bug or not? I think this is a pretty good model. If none of your users can log in, fix it right now. Fix it right away. If 1% of your users cannot log in, maybe fix it next sprint. Maybe you can build something for the 99% this sprint. Don't try to optimize for the 1%. Try to optimize for the 99%. Or, following the Pareto principle, maybe even optimize for the 80% of your customers. Growth. So how do startups grow? It's pretty simple. You acquire new customers, you convert them into paying customers, and then you get revenue. And revenue was your primary metric, remember? And then some of these customers are satisfied, so you retain them. And some of these customers are very passionate about your product, about your mission, and then they recommend your product to their friends. And that's basically how the growth engine works. And at the early stage, you should mainly focus on the conversion funnel. And what we usually do is that we try to build a funnel that has a reasonably decent conversion rate. Something along the lines of 1% to 5% conversion rate. And then we just start adding more people into the funnel. You could do it by paid ads, advertise on Facebook, for example, or Google Ads or whatever. And then, and the way you measure this is your conversion rate. That's a very important metric in startups. And then you should also take a look at your acquisition cost. How much are you paying for one extra customer? So customer acquisition cost is one of the metrics. And then you should look at your lifetime value of a customer. And there's this rule of thumb that the lifetime value of a customer should be 3x of the acquisition cost. If it's bigger than that, you're not spending enough on advertising. If it's smaller than that, you don't have a sustainable business model. Speed. So how do we go fast in startups? Why does this happen? Has anyone seen this happen before? Why does it happen? So this is a very classic communication problem. It's basically playing the telephone game. And the way we fix it is by having cross-functional teams. So we have engineers, designers, and product people working in one single team. And the most important part of this graph is the overlap. So designers need to understand engineering a little bit. It's good if they can write some basic code. And they need to understand the product. Engineers need to understand design and product as well. And every single member of the team has direct contact with the customers. So engineers, they talk to customers. They're not waiting for the product person to give them the customer insights or customer feedback. Avoid playing the telephone game. Next thing, speed equals stability. So there was this really interesting research done where they were looking at a bunch of engineering metrics in organizations, and they were trying to figure out which ones of these correlate with the business success, or which ones can predict whether the company is going to be successful or not. And they found that there are 4 metrics, 4 key metrics. So the first one, and these are engineering metrics, the first one is lead time, which basically means how long does it take me as an engineer to get my commit from my laptop into production in front of customers. And if it's less than 1 hour, you're doing good. Next one, deployment frequency. How often do we make releases? And you should release multiple times per day. Mean time to restore. So that basically means that if we have a production failure, we release, something breaks, people can't log in, the site is down, how fast can we recover? If you can roll back in 5 minutes, that's great. If you can, in most cases, recover in less than 1 hour, that's really good. And change fail percentage. If less than 15% of your production releases fail, then you're doing good. Next thing, hiring. So how do we hire good people? First of all, if you're a non-technical founder, then you need a technical co-founder. You need a CTO. You're not going to be able to raise any money. You're not going to be able to build a successful product if you don't have a good CTO. So make sure you have that. Second is that hiring is really hard, especially trying to understand whether they're good people with this 1-hour interview. So I would say that to hire a good team, you need to do a lot of hiring and firing. And I've seen many founders skip the firing part. And what ends up happening is that you hire some people, they end up being mishires, and then they're in the team and they don't deliver any value, and all the rest of the team is demotivated. They're not very motivated to work because there's this one guy who's not doing anything. So don't let that happen. Find those people, fire them, and don't think of it as something bad, because those people will actually be much happier in a different team or in a different company, in a different setting. Because people are not very happy if you're expecting them to deliver and they're not delivering, so they're just depressed and sad at your company anyway, so it's not the right place for them, and they will be much happier elsewhere. So be a strong leader and go through that painful chat with those people. And cultural fit is key. So if you end up hiring good people, you end up getting a good product. And remember, once you have your MVP out, it's just the beginning. Thanks.
Nice. All right, we got a couple minutes there. Take some questions. I was thinking about. You did a good talk, man. That was a long time. You did it well.
Thanks.
Looking nice. Any questions out there in the audience? Ah, it's a bright line. Good. How'd you feel up here today? All good? How you going good?
Yeah, the clicker didn't work at the beginning, so that's all good.
Always a complaint. Always a complaint. I'm kidding. Anything else out there before we carry on? All right, dude. It's all right. So, any final thoughts before we leave the stage?
Yeah, I mean, talk to customers and build product.
I like it. It's a good motto. Talk to customers, build product. Please, one more round of applause.
Thanks.